Hey, I'm Nico from Licks of the Beast, and in today's video, I'm gonna give you my first impressions on Iron Maiden's long-awaited new album, Senjutsu. Senjutsu is the 17th studio album this legendary band has put together, and in a lot of ways, I really feel they've managed to actually top themselves with this one. Now, I'm not gonna do a detailed analysis in this video because I'm still in the process of absorbing the songs and understanding how they're structured and what they're all about musically. This will be more of a quick summary of where I'm at with the album after listening to it 4 times all the way through over the past 3 days. The first thing that comes to mind is that this album is definitely not a live album where you can feel the songs were born out of jamming on ideas. This one feels very much like an album that came together in the studio where things were really composed piece by piece. This makes things feel less spontaneous and rockin', but the upside is that you get an album that feels truly epic with a cinematic, almost soundtrack-like quality to it. Everyone in the band is giving top-notch performances, and together they sound incredibly tight and precise, but with a looseness and effortlessness that only comes from playing with the same people at these levels for as long as they have. As good as Maiden were in the 80s, they could not have written an album like Senjutsu back then. And that is a big deal because it means the band hasn't stopped evolving and they're not resting on their laurels. To those who've been asking if I thought this might be their last album, I honestly don't think so because they're showing no signs of slowing down at all. Their creativity is as strong as it ever was, and they still have many stories to tell thematically, musically, and visually. Of course, there are many callbacks to previous songs, and that's to be expected. They have their sound and their writing style, and they're not rebranding themselves here, nor would I expect them to. So I know that some parts sound like this riff or that melody, but come on, after 17 albums, this shouldn't be a shock to anyone. I was a little disappointed that Dave Murray doesn't have any writing credits on this album, but he is in top form and is playing with more intensity than I felt from him in quite some time. His solos on Senjutsu, Lost in a Lost World, and the Parchment really made my ears perk up and go, whoa, Dave's on fire here. There's quite a few moments on the album where old school Dave shows up and absolutely kills. Okay, so having said all that, let's take a quick look at each song one by one. Again, this is by no means an in-depth look, but merely my first impressions. The opener, Senjutsu, is the song that at the moment stands out to me the most. It's their most unique opener to date. I mean, they've never opened an album with anything other than a straight-ahead rocker. And yet, this works surprisingly well. The harmonized vocals on the verse sound really intense and powerful, and that beautiful chorus melody is absolutely epic. I also really love Adrian's chugging riff. It's so badass. I'll skip over Stratego and the writing on the wall as I've already done a full video for each of those, so be sure to check those out. But I will say that I like them even more in the context of the album. Lost in a Lost World sounds like Steve had some thoughts, ideas, and feelings weighing very heavily on his mind. The song is very intense, and that whole intro section is the very definition of hauntingly beautiful. I get kind of Nightwish vibes here, especially when the harmonized vocalizing comes in. The pre-chorus melody is another one that has been stuck in my head, and I love how they go back to it in the soft outro. It's awesome arranging, and it really reinforces the impact of that melody. Days of Future Past is the only other short song after Stratego. And like Stratego, this one is a straightforward, heavy song. It sounds a bit like something that could have been on a Bruce Dickinson solo album, sort of in between Chemical Wedding and Tyranny of Souls, and that's great because I love them both. And I love the intensity of this one, and it has another great riff by Adrian. The Time Machine is a song that I was hoping was going to be good just because of the title, and I'm happy to say I think the song is phenomenal. The riff is in drop D tuning, and it reminds me of Siamese Dream era Smashing Pumpkins of all things. Especially when the harmony comes in. I can totally imagine Billy Corgan singing over this. It really does have a resemblance to Cherub Rock, because it's the same kind of riff, moving octave chords over a droning low pedal. And it's based on the Mixolydian mode. The vocal melodies kind of felt reminiscent of something off of Bruce's Skunkworks album, and I guess the 90s vibe of the riff is partly responsible for that. Darkest Hour is a very atmospheric song, kind of a cross between Children of the Damned and Coming Home. It's got some very powerful lyrics. Adrian and Dave have two really strong guitar solos, and I love the chord progression in the chorus. Death of the Celts. At first, I almost dismissed this one as the Clansman Revisited, but after the second and third time I heard it, I found myself enthralled with the song's powerful imagery and all of the different movements the song goes through. It feels like watching an epic movie. Bruce's performance on this song is so powerful, and Yannick takes a great solo. There's a break in there that feels like a little throwback to Peace of Mind. The Parchment is, in my opinion, a true masterpiece. It's got an exotic, dreamy vibe, a bit reminiscent of the Powerslave album, especially with that Phrygian dominant riff. This song features incredible guitar playing with so many creative licks from all three guitarists. It's got beautiful lyrics and beautiful melodies. The last words Bruce sings are so powerful, and kudos to him for pulling off those last verses, because Steve certainly did not make it easy with those lyrics. This song also has one of the most epic endings of the album, with that driving rhythm, the guitar solos, and then that last riff. The album closes with Hell on Earth, and this is the one song on the album that I have mixed feelings about, because I love the intro and outro so much. The riffs and melodies are great, the guitar solos are all mind-blowing, and the vocals are really catchy. The only thing is, I wish the vocal melodies weren't all anticipated by the guitars for the entire song, because I find it's a bit predictable when the vocal does come in, and it lessens the impact a little. Fortunately, they don't do that on the Love and Anger, Life and Danger part, because that part really does sound absolutely killer, especially with that nice steady groove. One final thing I want to talk about real quick is Kevin Shirley's production. A lot of people were worried about the sound because of the iffy quality of the streaming audio on some platforms, but this album really sounds big and full and clear. The bass and drums are punchy and crisp, the guitars are up front and sound big and crunchy, yet they never overpower the vocals, which I have to say sound wonderful all the way through. So those are my initial thoughts. I'm gonna sit with this one for a while and really take the time to absorb and understand it. As I go along, I'll post a few solo covers, maybe a full cover, as well as a breakdown or two. But I'm not in any rush. We're gonna have a good amount of time with this album before the next one. Even before the album tour really, since they still have to finish up the Legacy of the Beast tour. In the meantime, I hope you enjoy it. It's a fantastic album. It's a rich album with enough music, lyrics, sounds, and imagery to keep us engaged for the next few years and beyond. So let me know your thoughts and questions in the comments section. As usual, I want to remind you to please leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, and do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you all so much for watching, and stay tuned for more licks of the beast.